Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bitwig Studio and Music Production. This is lesson 3.13, and in this lesson, we're going to delve a little bit deeper into working with our next actions. So we've already made a video on next actions before, and if you haven't already seen it, I would encourage you to check it out. Just quickly, I wanted to talk about process versus product one more time, and maybe specifically how that can be somewhat troublesome when it comes to music creation and music production. So for me, the albums in the 21st century or the music in the 21st century that I've always found to be really interesting or really significant is music where the artist has come out and explicitly stated their process. So for example, somebody took samples from a farm, and it was samples from the life of a pig, so from its birth to its eventual death. And this composer took all those sounds, brought them into his digital audio workstation, and created an entire album using those samples, manipulating those samples, etc. That to me is really interesting and really unique, and hopefully that's a piece of work that survives in 100 or 200 years. If you go back and listen to it, you might think, oh, this doesn't really sound all that interesting. But when you know and you understand the process that he's had to go through to make that particular piece of work, you're going to start to really appreciate it that much more. And I hope what you guys could see from my last video was that my process was a little bit more complex and complicated than simply just dragging and dropping samples onto the timeline. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but it's not very unique. It's not kind of an interesting process. And for that same reason, you hear a lot of music that all sounds exactly the same. And the tricky thing is, with music, it's not like we showcase our work. It's not like we have a gallery opening and we stand up there and we talk for 30 minutes and there's critics and everybody writing down and listening. In the art world, in the studio art world, that's kind of the way things are now. The focus is all on the process because all of the beautiful things that have been done in the past, we're probably never going to be able to replicate or take further. So people are always trying to do new things. And at this point, the only way to do new things is to take on very different processes and to just kind of attempt to even redefine what art is. So that's kind of the goal of a lot of contemporary artists today, at least those that want to try to be remembered in history, which I don't really know in the 21st century if that's going to happen anymore, but that is kind of the aim, and that is the goal. Now with music, it's so much different because we could spend hundreds and hundreds of hours working on something, put it out to Beatport, and there it is, and that's it. There's no discussion. There's nothing talking about our process or our logic for how we've gone about making the music. It's just the file, and it gets listened to by, I would say, a wider range of people. You know who you're going to see at these art shows. You know the art critics. You know the patrons. You know the people who might buy it. It's kind of a very particular world, a particular group of socialites who go out and get involved in this. With music, not the same way at all. You put it out there, it could be listened to anybody at any time. And people, when dealing with music, are always very critical if it doesn't fit into their mold or fit to their conventions. And so they will probably blast your track if it doesn't sound like something that they're familiar with, right? People don't really like change. And even to get into more experimental music, you have to listen to it for a while to be able to acquire a taste for it. And I'm not saying it's for everybody because truthfully it isn't. But the point I'm trying to make here is that I want you guys to be very true to yourselves and true to your process and not worry so much about the product that comes out, especially when we're just creating. And next actions are an example of something that we can use inside of the software to help aid and abet our process, aid and abet our compositions. I would love in the future to have it be where the composer and even of very popular EDM genres and stuff come out and explain their process and show their projects. There's like so much secrecy involved in the world of music production for whatever reason. And there really doesn't need to be, because I would respect somebody so much more if I could see what they've done, see the things going on inside of their project, have them explain it to me in hopefully a digestible way, which is exactly what I'm trying to do for you guys here in all these videos, is explain some of these processes in a digestible way. and then perform their work or play their work back and let us all listen to it. Right now it's so difficult to know whether or not people are just dropping in samples on their timeline and clicking the play button. We're never going to know because nowadays there are such exotic and crazy samples out there, which I think is great. It provides wonderful source material, but then it's also difficult to distinguish one production from the other. And that's where I want you to try to stay true. Try not to just go and find a sample for something. Do your best to make something on your own if you can, and just keep creating and keep making new things and continuing to ignore those conventions, because the music that's actually going to mean something here in the 21st century down the road isn't going to be the popular music you hear today. EDM, this kind of EDM revolution that's, I think, starting to come to an end right now, is going to take up one paragraph in a textbook down the road. And they're going to say, okay, there was a guy called Avicii who made this track called Levels. It blew up. EDM was popular for the next 6 months, and then you move on. The works that are going to be continued to talk about in the future are the more experimental works that are pushing just music creation and music production in new ways. So that is the end of my sidebar rant. Time to start talking about the next actions. So we looked at this before, and we know that we need to either be in the mix view or we need to be in the clip launcher view right here. And when we're in one of these views, we can open up the inspector, click on one of our clips, and we have access to our next actions right here. And this seems like such a small and insignificant part of this inspector panel, but it's really incredibly powerful. And what I would encourage you to do is to open up a blank Bitwig project. You can go into that Beatport folder again, and what you're going to find are a ton of like electro drum loops. So I've just pulled in all of those and spread them across here on my track. And the best way to learn next actions is to kind of do this. Take a drum loop and then start messing around with these guys. So I'm going to go back into the mix view just because for me, it's a lot easier and more logical to see things going from top to bottom as opposed to left to right. I also have my mix down here, and I don't need to go into the arrange view and pull it up. I always will have access to it if I'm inside of my mixer panel view here inside of Bitwig Studio. So let's take a listen to this. It's just going to be a classic drum loop. Let me turn down my volume real quick. Okay, so we have a 4-bar clip. And right now, if I set my next action to do something, for example, let's say I wanted to play random, which means it would play a random clip here on this first track. If I play it back, it's actually not going to do anything. It's just going to keep looping around and around. So if I actually want my next action to occur, to take place, I need to set a value here. This is our time value, and as you can read, it says time until the action is performed. A time of 0 disables the behavior, and right now we're at a time of 0. But if I pull this up to 4 bars, and now I have it playing random, it will play back, and then it's going to randomly choose one of these other clips. It could also play itself again. So let's see what happens. I'll click play. And there you go, it's moved on now to scene 4. But now this one is just going to keep looping indefinitely because in this one we don't have any kind of next action established. So with our next actions, we have a ton of different choices here. We can go to just stop the clip. So after 4 bars, it will just completely stop. We could choose round robin, which I think if we choose round robin, it's going to just go to the next clip. Let's see what this one does. I'm curious if it's going to play the next one or just play this one again. Yeah, it's going to go to the next one. But the nice thing is if you select round robin for all of these clips, for example, and I'm going to just flip this up to 4 so we can enable this for all of them, and I select round robin, if we play here at the end, what's going to happen is it will loop back around. So now we are going to be playing this back indefinitely in order. So I'll just let you hear that. Really grooving. Okay, so round robin could be very useful in certain situations if you want to just keep playing that same sequence of loops in order over and over again without ever having to worry about it stopping. But right now I'm just going to select all of them and select stop, which means after you play it once this time value has gone up, it's going to stop. So if I were to select something different, like 5, we'll just do something kind of random, we'll hear and listen to when it stops. So it's going to go around once, play one more bar, and after a quarter note, it will stop. So kind of a awkward jolt there, but you get the point. So what I'd say is load something like this up and just kind of go through all of these and see what they do. Return to arrangement is kind of interesting because it's going to play back into your arrangement view. So be careful with this one unless you actually want something to be playing back in the arrangement. So right now, I don't have anything in the arrangement. So if I play this and I set this back to, I don't know, we'll just say 3 bars, it's just going to stop. And obviously, if we look at our arrangement view, we don't have anything going on here in the timeline. But if we did, that's what would be playing back. So where this gets really interesting and where there are a number of applications for this is when we start setting multiple follow actions that are doing different things all inside of one track. So I'll just give you a quick example. Again, our next assignment is going to be creating a composition using mainly just follow actions. So you'll get a chance to really experiment. But let's say I select all of these and I choose to play other. So play other is going to be doing a play random, but it guarantees that it won't play itself again. And I'm just going to set this to 2 bars so that it will go through pretty rapidly. And we have to cue it up here. 3 bars, I said 2. Okay, so where this can now start to get interesting is if I want, I could give myself a little bit of space here, duplicate this one, option click this guy. I'm doing this at sheer random right now. And let me just go back in and set this for all of them again. So now our new clips are going to also adhere to those next actions. And the nice thing about that is I never even had to stop the clips. They're all still playing back. But what I could do is I could go into some of these clips and start changing their start position. Okay, I'm going to do this at random right now. And when we go to some of these, it's going to sound a little bit awkward because I'm not doing this at any logic. But that's kind of the cool thing about this, and the cool thing about using these next actions is that you can really syncopate things and do things you would never expect. So I could even take this and I could click shift, and so I can just drop this anywhere. We've talked about the importance of the shift key before. I'll do it again. Not only that, but we could change the loop length of some of these. So I could just make a tiny little loop here. And so hopefully it triggers one of these guys in a second. There it goes. So you can hear the kind of variation you can get very, very easily. So don't be afraid to change your length of your loops, change your start and end positions. The end position isn't really going to matter because it's always going to be working with the loop, assuming that you have the loop turned on. If you don't, it might just play and stop. And so then you could have silence for a little while because it's just going to keep playing back across. But all of these things are very interesting, and you can obviously adjust the length for each of them as well. And so what you'd want to do is pretty much split these out by a particular like sound or group of sounds. So you might have one channel that's just drums, one channel that's just bass lines, one that's just kooky effects, one that maybe is spoken word, whatever. You can do so much. And then if you just adjust the follow action for all of these guys, so I'll go back and let's set this after maybe 3. Let's do something just bizarre. Why not do something crazy? And we do play other, and I'm just going to go in here and change the start position on these guys just for fun. Oops, sorry about that. We'll just do a couple of them. So now if I'm playing back, I'm going to get incredible amounts of variation, and I'm not even doing anything. I'm just clicking play here, and letting it go. Although, of course, I'm running into a glitch and this isn't going. Let's stop this and get this to work real quick. Let's see what we can do. Okay, so let's just set this to 2 and make sure it's working. Okay, finally we got to go. I don't know what was up with that. I do tend to run into some weird just glitches when I'm doing some of these things in the program. And the truth is, when they're beta testing this, they beta tested with a lot of people, or a lot of people who wanted to do the beta testing were pretty much out and out producers, not necessarily experimental composers who would have more use for using something like the next action. But just beware that you might run into glitches from time to time. But a lot of times just starting over, going through the process, you can get it to fix itself. So let's just play this back for like a minute, and you're going to hear some of the interesting variations we can get. Actually, I want to set this so it's not happening at the same time. So there we go. So now I'm getting them to change, and they're not going to awkwardly cut right at the same time, which is going to be helpful for me then, because it's going to make more sense. If this makes any sense at all, right? So to my ear, that actually sounds quite interesting. Now, this is using it in a very experimental context, but if you were a DJ or something, you can take these next action ideas and pull them way out. And so we've talked about this a number of times about how all of the things inside of Bitwig, we can go from very micro level to a very macro level. On a very macro traditional level, if you just want to have one track be feeding into another, you could so easily set up your next action so that you have the right amount of time here, and you could just set it to play next, right? So meanwhile that's happening, you can be manipulating another effect in another sort of track somewhere else, and you don't have to worry about queuing up and playing that next track. And we've talked about how the evolution of DJing is changing, or the evolution of the DJ is constantly occurring. So we're starting to see people implement and be willing to use some of these automated features built in because it gives them time to do other things that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do. Whether those are positive things or negative things, maybe they're just checking their Facebook, I don't know, but that's kind of this idea of these next actions. You're giving the computer the opportunity to do the clip launching for you so that you can focus on other aspects. So you might have a reverb, delay, whatever, gated effect, and you're playing with the parameters, and you're like, oh crap, I need to change song. Well, the next action can do that for you. And you can take this all the way down to the most micro of level, which I'll probably do in one of my examples here when I make one of these tracks, is you could take a stab of something, and then you could set it to either a scale or just a number of random pitches, random frequencies, and you could play back, and you could create a melody using just the follow actions or the next actions, which I find to be so cool and so crazy. And very rarely do people take advantage of the next action section, but it can be just so creative and so crazy. It's a lot of fun. So if you haven't already done so, please open up a blank project, just load in a bunch of random samples and start playing with these next actions. Because in the next video, I'm going to give you another potential idea for a creation project. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you again in the next lesson.